This is not a civil war in Syria. That's probably the first thing we heard, and we heard it over and over again. It is not President Assad against his own people. It is President Assad and the Syrian people all together in unity against outside forces, outside mercenary forces, terror organizations, the names change every day or every other day to try to protect their identity and maybe keep the connection between the country that funded it and that group kind of a little bit more nebulous. But there are groups, mercenary forces, supported by Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, the United States, and underneath it, Israel, the state of Israel. And these outside mercenary forces are the ones that are terrorizing the Syrian people and are attempting to divide the Syrian people. I remember when the U.S. invaded Iraq, our organization was against it well before the invasion ever began. But once the invasion was over and the United States was setting up a government, we talked to many Iraqis who said, we're not Sunni and Shia, we're not Sunni, Shia, and Kurds, but the United States is trying to divide us that way. And we got exactly the same message when we were in Syria. We are Syrians. As Henry said before, whether you're Christian, Muslim, or other, you're Syrian. And that's one of the things that's enabled the Assad government to withstand 5+ years of this kind of outside attack. When it was time for the U.S. to unseat Saddam Hussein, after years of sanctions and 2 wars, he fell like that. When it was time, the United States decided time for Gaddafi to go, he fell like that. But when it was time, the United States decided it was time for Assad to go, he did not fall. And why? Because he has the support of 23 million Syrian people.
The motive, in my opinion, of the U.S. war is to destroy an independent Arab secular state. It's the last secular Arab state standing, and it wants a client regime, like Libya, like Iraq, like a number of other countries you could mention. The U.S. hostility to independent Syria long precedes 2011, the beginning of the war. The U.S., I concluded, claims to be against ISIS terrorism, but yet it's been loath to fight a really consistent fight against terrorism. Certain privileged groups, such as the al-Nusra Front, the names shift, are called moderate rebels because they fight the Syrian government, and the U.S. wants that. They are not moderate. They beheaded a 12-year-old boy when we were there. We saw it on YouTube and on TV. The motives of the U.S. proxy war states are somewhat different. Sectarian motives and regional power rivalries affect Saudi Arabia and Qatar. The Wahhabist ideology, the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood, is a sick, medieval, backward ideology. It drives the Saudi state. It motivates that state to finance this war. And Damascus, by contrast, promotes a socially inclusive and pluralistic form of Islam. And we met the leaders of that form of Islam, and they are humane and democratic-minded people and have every reason to join with the American people in stopping this insane support for Wahhabism, which is behind so much terrorism in the world.
We've heard in the media that hospitals have been attacked. Well, this media is referring to the pockets of Aleppo that were occupied by terrorists. And they have manufactured stories, and I can give you a precise account. In April of this year, there was a hospital called the Al-Quds Hospital, which in a concerted effort, all media said was attacked and targeted and badly damaged by either the Syrians or the Russians. In fact, the Russians had satellite imagery showing that this hospital was in the same shape that it was in October 2015. No difference. Therefore, it was not attacked. Months later, The Guardian, which is a prominent British newspaper, actually said the Al-Quds Hospital that it had alleged months prior to be attacked and destroyed was treating victims of so-called chemical weapons attacks. So even the media that is lying is inconsistent in their lies. but there have been hospitals attacked. I went to the Al-Dabit hospital, which is in Aleppo City. It's a maternity hospital. It was attacked on May 3rd, and 3 women were killed. You would think this would be something raised at the UN or by so-called human rights groups, but it was not. In December 2013, the Kindi hospital was attacked and destroyed. It was the largest and best cancer treatment hospital in the Middle East. It was destroyed by al-Nusra terrorist truck bombings. And in fact, in recent media reports on Aleppo, again alleging Syrian or Russian strikes on hospitals, Fox News actually had the audacity to use a photo of Al-Kindi hospital and allege that this is in eastern areas of Aleppo and that this hospital had been attacked by Syrian or Russian strikes. This goes to show how much the media has been lying from the very beginning about Syria and continues to lie. When I went to Aleppo, I spoke with the Aleppo Medical Association. They comprise 4,160 active and registered doctors. More lies in the media have said the last doctor in Aleppo, the last pediatrician in Aleppo. Of these over 4,000 doctors, 800 of them are specialists. So you can see that when the media talks about Aleppo, it's talking about areas that were occupied by terrorists. And it's completely negating the suffering and the will of the Syrian people in greater Aleppo.
Those of my fellow countrymen who are dogmatic about Assad demonization are not going to like what I have to say now, which is that the Syrian government is popular, and for that reason, it is winning the war. The Battle of Aleppo will probably be decided soon, relatively soon, and maybe the last hurrah, in my opinion, of the foreign mercenaries. The president is popular. His government is recognized as legitimate by the UN. It contests and wins elections. The elections are monitored. There's a parliament which contains opposition parties. We met them. There is a significant nonviolent opposition which is trying to work constructively for its own social vision. Some of it is inside the government, which in effect is a government of national unity. Some of it is in the parliament. We met them. The Minister of Reconciliation, as I think some of us have said, deals directly with armed groups, and he's an opposition leader.
The White Helmets were founded in 2013 by a British ex-military officer. They have been funded to the tune of $100 million by the US, UK, and Europe and other states. They purport to be rescuing civilians in eastern Aleppo and Idlib, yet no one in eastern Aleppo has heard of them. And I say no one, bearing in mind that now 95% of these areas of eastern Aleppo are liberated. The White Helmets purport to be neutral, yet they can be found carrying guns and standing on the dead bodies of Syrian soldiers. And their video footage actually contains children that have been recycled in different reports. So you can find a girl named Aya who turns up in a report in month, say, August, and she turns up in the next month in 2 different locations. So they are not credible. The SOHR is not credible. Unnamed activists are not credible. Once or twice, maybe, but every time, not credible. So your sources on the ground, you don't have them. As for your agenda, not your, but the agenda of some corporate media, it is the agenda of regime change. How can the New York Times, I was reading it this morning, or how can Democracy Now!, which I was reading the other day, maintain until this day that this is a civil war in Syria? How can they maintain until this day that that the protests were unarmed and nonviolent until, say, 2012? That is absolutely not true. How can they maintain that the Syrian government is attacking civilians in Aleppo when every person that's coming out of these areas occupied by terrorists is saying the opposite? So that's with regards to your question on lying Western media. How do I quantify the support of the Syrian people? The elections. In 2014, the Syrian people held elections. The voter turnout was 88%, including people in Lebanon where I was during the elections in Lebanon, which were actually ran for 2 days, extended hours, people walking for kilometers to reach the embassy, including people who flew from their own countries like mine, which has criminally shut the Syrian embassy so that Syrian people have no rights, and including people within Syria who braved a torrent of terrorist mortars and missiles on election day.
Assad government provides free health care, free universal health care to everyone. It's a mission. It's part of the government's mission. Free education for everyone, from primary school all the way through even to university and medical school. And we met with one person, when we met with this one particular person from the nonviolent opposition, we asked him, well, tell us, what are some of your grievances with the Assad government. And he said, well, you just heard that it costs about $50 a year for people going to medical school. We think that's too high. He was being somewhat facetious, of course, but these are the kinds of policies that our citizens here in the United States are calling for. Tuition-free college, universal health care. So the Assad Assad government, is in the business of doing this and providing this to the people. And without a doubt, even the nonviolent opposition parties who had issue with issues of democracy or corruption prior to 2011, everyone has thrown themselves in behind the Assad government, because that's the best hope, the best bet for the Syrian people.
Reminded of the famous comment by the American writer Mark Twain, who once said that it's not what we don't know that gets us into trouble. What gets us into trouble is what we think we know for sure that just ain't so. And that's what I think of when I think about my fellow Americans and what they know about Syria and what they think they know about the war and the Syrian government and the Syrian leadership. What they think they know, I'll argue, just ain't so. And so we have to take that on.
Other presidents tried to say nice things about the Russians and other, warm things in their heart and they love, not in the face of an active attack on the country.
Hey, man.
The Russian thing is just a big nothing burger.
Really?
Yeah.
Then why is CNN constantly Russia this, Russia that?
Because it's ratings.
I would encourage everybody in this room and frankly everybody across the country to take a look at it.
Changing it from fake news though.
Doesn't that undermine?
Very fake news.
I know, but aren't you?
The Russian thing is just a big nothing burger.
Today we continue with our American Pravda investigations inside America's mainstream media with part 2 on CNN. Fake news. The Russia story. You're about to see one of CNN's most prominent left-leaning political commentators in total agreement with President Trump. We think this might be the first time this has ever happened. Maybe it's because he didn't realize he was going to be on television. And as Chris Cuomo has said, sometimes that's when you're the most honest.
Hey, man. We met in Palm Springs a few years back.
Good to see you, man. You good?
Yeah. How you been? What are you doing?
Good.
What do you think's going to happen this week? I mean, with the whole Russia thing.
The Russian thing is just a big nothing burger.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't think that?
There's nothing there you can do. The Russian thing is just a big nothing burger.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't think that?
There's nothing there you can do.
Yesterday, you met supervising producer John Bonifield.
Then why is CNN constantly Russia this, Russia that?
Because it's ratings.
Because it's ratings?
Our ratings are incredible right now.
But honestly, you think the whole Russia shit is just bullshit?
Could be bullshit. I mean, it's mostly bullshit right now. We don't have any big giant proof. But
CNN's response, quote, CNN stands by our medical producer John Bonifield. Diversity of personal opinion is what makes CNN strong. We welcome it and embrace it. Unquote. Good, because Bonifield says he was not alone in his cynicism for the news business, and Dan Jones agrees with him that the Russia story is bold.
So I love the news business, but
I find it so
I'm
fascinating.
very cynical about it. At the same time, so are most of my colleagues.
Yeah, it's
I'm not alone.
The Russian thing is just a big nothing burger.
Really?
The organization is reeling. The president is posting headlines about our investigation, and even mainstream media is paying attention. White House spokesperson Sarah Huckabee Sanders has a recommendation to all.
There's a video circulating now, whether it's accurate or not, I don't know, but I would encourage everybody in this room and frankly everybody across the country to take a look at it.
So there you have it. Van Jones admits the Russia story is just a nothing burger. Bonifield says it's all about ratings. The White House is telling everyone to go watch the videos. The media for years has gotten away with manufacturing consent. People are fed up with the emptiness and the artifice that pervades our media. Well, I'll tell you something. Change is coming. Whether CNN...
The United States has long been overrun. If you're not aware of this, you are clearly in a coma. If you're an American so-called red-blooded patriot, your Constitution has been completely and totally defiled and destroyed. It literally is no more valuable than the toilet paper you're wiping your ass with when you go to take a shit. It is that bad. And guess what? Your country is totally run by Jewish supremacists, Talmudic, pedophile, satanic, bankster cultists. Literally. That is who owns your country. When you watch Netanyahu come to your Congress 3 times and receive 29 standing ovations so that American sons and daughters can go off and fight wars for Israel, to the tune of 22 American service members a day committing suicide, all the while, you know something's gone terribly wrong with America. The greatest nation in the world is about it at this point. And I don't say this because it gives me any joy. I say it because, Jesus Christ, at what point is a fire going to be lit under the ashes of the American so-called patriot? Where the hell are you? And now you put your faith, some of you, half of you put your faith in Donald Trump. Before that, half of you put your faith in Barack Obama. And before that, Bush. And before that, Clinton. And before, it's the same old story. The last president you need to go back to who had any honor and integrity was indeed John F. Kennedy. And what did John F. Kennedy do? Well, he went after the Jewish supremacist, Talmudic, pedophile, satanic banksters. That's what he did. He was threatening to close down Dimona, the power plant that has produced 200 to 400 nuclear weapons for Israel, in which they're going to exercise the so-called Samson option, if indeed they feel they're threatened. And they are threatened, I can assure you of that. If John F. Kennedy was successful, he would have cut AIPAC down at its knees when it was called the American Zionist Council. And also, and most importantly of all, he threatened the Jewish supremacist, Talmudic, satanic, pedophile banksters with the Federal Reserve notes. Instead of that, he was issuing United States notes. I carry one in my wallet to make the point that if America wants to be free again, you need to get rid of those Jewish banksters who are running your country and are embarrassing you. And like Henry Kissinger says, the military are nothing but dumb animals to be used. You're being used, and now you're being used to go fight for ISIS. ISIS, Israeli Secret Intelligence Service. That's what ISIS is. Israeli Secret Intelligence Services. They never attack Israel, nor did Al-Qaeda before it. How much more obvious does it need to be? How much more obvious does it need to be? They don't attack Saudi Arabia either, but they attack Muslims all over the place. They attack Western nations all over the place. They've attacked America as well, but they never attack Israel. How much more obvious does it need to be? Israeli Secret Intelligence Service. And everything we see happening in Israel and the Middle East is a part of a plan to expand Israel, Greater Israel. If you don't know what it is, look it up. I'm kind of tired of repeating this. But right now, it couldn't be any more obvious. If you're in the U.S. military, you literally are going to be called on and are being called on to fight for ISIS. You are. How is that upholding your oath? Your oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States. How is that consistent? What the hell happened that you would go and fight for ISIS as you fought for Al-Qaeda before it? These son of a bitches are using you. And at some point, you're going to need to do one very obvious thing, and that is disobey the orders. I can't wait for that. And to the U.S. military, what I'm really looking forward to in you, since some of you have some honor and integrity, is arresting these traitors. They're the ones that put their hand up under oath as well to uphold the U.S. Constitution. The NDAA, successively, over and over, the Patriot Act 1 and 2, and countless other pieces of legislation are the complete opposite. They are at the antithesis of the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. They are unlawful. They are illegal, and they need to be rescinded. And a government needs to be put in place in the United States that respects the United States Constitution until such time the United States is being run by traitors who have committed provable treason And the U.S. military is being used as dupes to maintain that power structure. It is an embarrassment. Nothing but love and respect to a ton of people out there who are making some very important commentary and dealing with those who are directly in power. And make no mistake about it, those who control the money supply, which I've named now several times, one more time, the Jewish supremacist, Talmudic, satanic, pedophile bankster cult is running the world through the control of the money. They control all the central banks. If we want a better world, we will have it the moment that we take back control of the issuance of money and we write off all of our debt. Isn't that a good idea? Why don't we just write off all that debt? Who do we owe the money to? The Jewish supremacist, Talmudic, satanic, pedophile bankster cult is who we're in debt to. And our governments work for them. And that is why they're telling you we're in debt. I don't know how much more pathetically obvious it needs to be, but that's it in a nutshell. So if I come back and have to pay some sort of price for speaking this sort of truth, well, God bless me for having the opportunity and the will to say it, and everyone else who is speaking the truth. Really, in all honesty, love and respect to you.